Good evening. You are tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Farhana Sheikh. Record high cases and deaths, worsening situation beyond Klang Valley. And new cabinet to be revealed tomorrow. Can we expect more women representation this time? That's coming up. Malaysia logged a staggering 24,599 COVID-19 cases, the highest recorded in a single day since the pandemic began. Total deaths for today also reached a new record with 393 fatalities, 100 of which were brought in dead. Out of the 100 that didn't make it to the hospital, 50 were Malaysians, 50 were foreigners, while Selangor once again had the most number of infections, with 6,936 cases. The situation beyond Klang Valley appears to be worsening. Cases in 3 states, Sabah, Penang and Johor, hit a record high today. Sabah COVID-19 spokesman Datuk Sri Masidi Manjun, however, said that backlog cases account for about 62% of total 3,487 cases reported in the last 24 hours. Over 53,000 industrial workers in Selangor have tested positive for COVID-19 since last month. Selangor Menteri Besar Datuk Sri Amiruddin Syari said the cases were detected through screening conducted at their respective workplaces. Amiruddin said the cases were identified from screenings carried out as preparation to work on site, close contact screenings and other screenings at private health facilities. Out of the total workers infected, more than half or 62% are in factories, while others are from the service sector, construction sector and commercial sector. The total includes 17.1% cases detected in Selangor who are industrial workers. Amiruddin added that 79 factories were shut down between July 13th and August 23rd. The closure order was issued for 7 days. Industry owners were also given instructions to improve their operations during this time. Malaysia should begin talks on booster shots of the COVID-19 vaccines. President of Association of Private Hospitals Malaysia, Dr. Kuljit Singh, said priority for these doses should be given to healthcare workers both in the public and private sectors.
There are reports to say that the earlier vaccines may not have been good enough to cover these variants. And again, there are also studies to show after 6 months onwards, the immunity will start coming down. So a lot of uncertainty, but I think it's time for us to start thinking. I'm not saying that we do it immediately. We start thinking in the next 1 or 2 months that we should start booster doses for healthcare workers, both public and private healthcare sectors.
COVID-19 Vaccine Supply Access Guarantee Special Committee JKJAV announced 42.2% of the country's population is fully vaccinated as of today. Kuljit opined for the country to begin booster shots only after Malaysia immunized 70 to 80% of the adult population. Meanwhile, he said that children should also be prioritized in the vaccination program as this group can act as carriers of the virus.
Once we reach at least 70 or 80% of our population is fully vaccinated, and at the pace that we are going, and if we get enough vaccines and we don't have any reason whereby the vaccines are slowed down, delivery of vaccines slowed down to Malaysia, I think we should be able to get 80% by October. And I think by end of September, October, we should slowly start the booster dosages.
Prime Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob is scheduled to announce his much-anticipated cabinet tomorrow morning. What kind of governing structure will this cabinet be? Will they be senior ministers or a return to the traditional deputy prime minister, or both? Political analyst Dr. Kartini Khalid weighs in on this matter.
Whether or not the senior minister position remained, I think the prime minister can decide not to offer any deputy position if creating such a post leading to another power struggle and dissatisfaction among the coalition party members. Whether or not the senior minister position retained, as I said earlier, it depends on the prime minister decision. Still, suppose there is no deputy prime minister position, in that case he might want to consider keeping the senior minister's appointment to create balance and honouring the MPs of the alliance. He can also improve the 5 clusters and create a new version by consolidating ministries that shared standard function or resizing appointed ministers and deputy ministers.
In the Perikatan National Government, led by former Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, there were 5 female ministers, or 15% of the total cabinet members. How will this incoming administration, led by Prime Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, fare when it comes to women representation? To discuss this matter, we have Alicia Wong, campaigner for 111 Initiative, whose aim is to make the 222-seat Dewan Rakyat better reflect Malaysian demographics by being filled with 111 women MPs. Thank you, Alicia, for joining us tonight. Let's begin our discussion with your expectation on the number of women representatives to be announced in the cabinet tomorrow.
Hi, Farhana. Thanks for having me. I would say I remain cautiously optimistic ahead of the cabinet announcement. While I do hope that the new incumbent government would really include more women representatives than the previous administration, because then it would then signal to the public that this new government has a different set of priorities. But I also acknowledge the fact that they only have a handful of female candidates to begin to work with.
Well, we'll definitely have to wait and see for the announcement later. Alicia, if you can share with us, how important is it to continuously increase women representation at all levels of governance?
Women's representation in all levels of governance is really important because a decision maker's gender really distinctively affects what kind of policies and actions are affected and prioritized. Various studies and evidence through empirical studies have showed that when more women participate in leadership or through politics, there is a drastic increase in policy making that emphasizes different set of priorities such as quality of life, families, women, marginalized communities, as compared to the traditional kind of priorities that Malaysian government have. In the past few months that we've seen, the pandemic has really exacerbated conditions for women. Social effects for COVID-19 call for a really greater representation for women in leadership, because this pandemic has really affected women disproportionately worldwide and especially in Malaysia. And I think these are the issues that needs to be specifically addressed for and accounted for.
Now, Alicia, when we talk about women representation and appointing cabinet members based on their credibility, do you think a quota system is better than a merit-based system at this point in time?
As a principle, I was never really a big fan of the quota system, but however, based on the latest World Economic Forum Global Gender Report, it is estimated that it will take the human population an average of approximately 135 more years for women and men to reach parity. Because of that, and also based on Malaysia's past history, I do think that there needs to be some form of mechanism in place to give women a leg up in the current system that we have. So how I really envisioned it is that it could be a hybrid model, and that the government will need to set a very clear commitment, which is measurable and time-bounded as a target to help women achieve parity.
I see. Thank you for sharing us your views, Alicia. That was Alicia Wong from 111 Initiative. Extending this conversation on Consider This Later, we asked our guests if Malaysia might get the cabinet we need to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. That's coming up right after AWANI tonight. We will go for a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The US and UK warned their citizens to avoid Kabul airport due to a threat of an Islamic State terror attack. Thousands are still gathered at the airport seeking to flee Afghanistan ahead of the August 31st deadline for foreign forces to withdraw completely. Officials highlighted the danger of an attack from ISIS-K, a group known to be the sworn enemy of the Taliban. The group, officials say, may want to create mayhem at the airport and is capable and planning to carry out multiple attacks. The US has urged crowds trying to access Kabul airport to leave the area as the British and Australian governments warn of a high threat of a terrorist attack. So far, more than 80,000 people have been evacuated, with more than 10,000 currently awaiting at Kabul airport. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the Taliban pressured to keep Kabul airport open after August 31st have agreed to allow Americans and Afghans with valid paperwork to leave after the deadline. Vice President Kamala Harris said the United States welcomes competition and does not seek conflict with Beijing, but will speak up on issues like maritime disputes in the South China Sea. Harris made the comments in Hanoi as she concluded Southeast Asia trip aimed at reassuring Washington's commitment to the region and to counter China's influence.
When it comes to Beijing, let me be very clear, and the President has been very clear. We welcome stiff competition. We do not seek conflict, but on issues like you raised, the South China Sea, we're going to speak up. We're going to speak up when there are actions that Beijing takes that threaten the rules-based international order. Again, such as activity in the South China Sea. And the issue in particular of freedom of navigation in that regard is a vital issue for this region.
During her visit to Singapore and Vietnam, Harris charged China with bullying its Southeast Asian neighbours, triggering sharp rebukes from Beijing, which accused the US of meddling in regional affairs and disrupting peace. Australia reported over 1,000 new domestic COVID-19 cases for the first time since the start of the pandemic. New South Wales reported a record high of 1,029 cases and 3 fatalities from the virus in the past 24 hours. According to State Premier Gladys Berejiklian, the 3 who died were unvaccinated.
Berejiklian also announced a slight easing of restrictions for vaccinated people from mid-September after the state hit a target of 6 million jabs in a population of about 8 million. This is despite growing pressure on hospitals due to soaring cases. Yesterday, a record high of 136,000 people came forward to get vaccinated in New South Wales. Meanwhile, Victoria State, which is grappling with a smaller outbreak that emerged in Melbourne, announced a further 80 new cases on Thursday. More than half of Australia's 25 million people are stuck in lockdown, including in Sydney, where residents have been under stay-at-home orders for more than 2 months.
At least 20 people in western Venezuela were killed in mudslides following torrential rains that caused rivers to overflow. More than 1,200 homes in the state of Mérida had been destroyed. 17 people remain missing as rescue workers continue to search the wreckage.
Images shared on social media showed cars being swept down streets while buildings were filled with mud. Authorities are trying to restore electricity and telephone services in the affected areas, but recovery efforts may be hampered by the lack of resources at the state and municipal governments. Authorities said at least 54,000 people in the 87 municipalities were affected in recent deadly floodings.
That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news update on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and the Astro AWANI app. I'm Farhana Sheikh. We'll see you again.